Hey, what is going on, guys? In this video today, we're going to be comparing the new Xbox Series X/S controller to the Xbox One controller. So this is actually one of the very interesting differences between the PS5 and the new Xboxes. On the Series X and Series S, you can use the previous generation controllers on the new consoles, and you can also play any game you want. However, on PS5, you can only use the DualShock PS4 controller to play PS4 games that are backwards compatible. Now you might think, well, Fortnite was made on the PS4, so that counts, right? And unfortunately, the answer to that is no. Since Fortnite made the next-gen version of their game an entirely new build, it isn't technically backwards compatible, and therefore you actually can't use the PS4 controller on the PS5 version of Fortnite. However, like I just said with Xbox, we're lucky enough to have the choice, and since I know the majority of you guys use the default controller, I thought comparing the current and next-gen controllers would be an interesting thing to do. Now, there obviously isn't going to be a massive difference between them, but there are some important things that I want to point out and hopefully use to make your decision easier. So without further ado, let's get right into it. Alright, so the first major difference I want to talk about between the new Xbox and the Xbox One controller is the grip. So when you look at the two controllers on the surface, it's kinda hard to spot any differences right away, but when you pick the controller up and really get a feel for it, there is a very noticeable difference in the amount of grip, and I think it's a major advantage for the new controller. Xbox.com actually posted an interview with the guy who is the lead designer of the new controller, so in his own words, here's what causes the better grip. He says, "We added a tactile dot pattern on the triggers and bumpers, which provides grip to improve feel and performance during gameplay. That's something we've had on special edition controllers and fans love it, so now it's the new standard. A similar yet more subtle pattern is on the back grips of the controller as well. The D-pad, bumpers, and triggers now have a matte finish to maintain a smooth, consistent feel whether your hands are wet or dry." So it may not sound like the craziest thing in the world by any means, but it really does make the controller just feel so much smoother in your hand while you're using it. On the old Xbox controller, the entire thing has this same smooth and almost slippery feel to it, and it's not like your fingers are going to be sliding all over the place, but your grip just doesn't feel as firm as it does on the new controller. So at least in my opinion, that's definitely one point in favor of the Series X/Series S controller. The next interesting difference between the new and old Xbox controller is how it accommodates certain hand sizes. So apparently, a complaint that a decent amount of people had about the old Xbox controller was that it felt kinda uncomfortable if you had smaller hands. And honestly, I can totally see it. About a year ago, I randomly decided to use a PS4 controller for a couple games just to see what it was like, and everything felt just so much closer together than it did on the Xbox controller, so it almost seems like one was more designed for people with smaller hands, while the other was more designed for people with larger hands. So here's another quote from the controller interview that talked about how they tried to change this. "One key area we're improving is fitting a wider range of hand sizes, especially smaller hands. By accommodating hands similar to those of an average 8-year-old, we found we could improve accessibility and comfort for hundreds of millions more players, while at the same time not overly negatively affecting the experience for those with larger hands. We did that by rounding the bumpers, slightly reducing and rounding parts around the triggers, and carefully sculpting the grips." Now this is something that I actually think is pretty noticeable, and it's really going to vary person by person whether this change was a good one or a bad one. I'll be honest, when I grip the new controller, it does sort of feel a little bit more like the PS4 controller, and the buttons just seem ever so slightly closer together. Again, not the biggest issue in the world by any means, but for me personally, I actually like the spacing of the older Xbox controller a little bit more. I'll be honest, I've never measured my hands, so I have no idea whether they'd be considered small, average, or large, but I do think your hand size is going to be a factor that you should consider when you're making the choice between the two options. The next difference that they point out in this interview is probably the most important one in regards to Fortnite, and it has to do with connectivity and latency improvements on the new controller. The lead designer says, another area in which gamers are always looking for connectivity improvements is reducing latency. We're introducing a system-wide set of improvements we call dynamic latency input, which includes specific technology in the console and the HDMI connection to your TV, and it all starts with the controller. Essentially, information is sent more frequently from the controller and matched with exact frames on your game on screen. The result, we shave off precious milliseconds at every step of gameplay, and actions are happening even more instantaneous. So that one right there is obviously a big factor. I've mentioned in 2 previous videos now how a lot of people are reporting lower input delay on the new consoles, but then you also have people saying that they feel no difference at all. I'm thinking that this right here could actually be a possible explanation. Maybe your input delay is only going to be lower if you use the new controller because they specifically designed it with that in mind. And yeah, sure, you can argue that a couple milliseconds may not be the biggest deal in the world, but for a game like Fortnite that's so reliant on quick flick shotgun shots, I really think any improvement on input delay is important no matter how small it may be. So this is definitely a win for the new Xbox controller, and I don't think there's any way you can debate that. The final interesting change that was made with the new controller is that it now has a dedicated share button in the middle of the controller between the select and start buttons. They describe it by saying, the new share button is the best way to make capturing and sharing instantaneous. It's easy to just grab a screenshot or record a video without needing on-screen menus. Then you can easily access and share content with your favorite social platforms or directly with your friends. So this is cool for all games and Fortnite specifically. Now you can take clips and screenshots much quicker than before, so much so that you can even almost do it in the middle of fights. So another feature that I don't think is single-handedly going to make someone think the new Xbox controller is the best thing in the world, but it is a nice little change that I really do like. So overall, at least to me, I think the choice is pretty clear. The new Xbox controller is just a little bit better in multiple aspects, and that makes it the fairly obvious better option here. However, I am still a bit concerned about the whole hand size thing. Maybe I'm overreacting a bit and it was just a placebo effect, but I could definitely see someone with really big hands struggling a lot more with the new Xbox controller compared to the old one. But as long as that isn't a problem, I would strongly advise you use the new controller as soon as you get your next-gen Xbox. It honestly doesn't even take much getting used to because, like I said, it's incredibly similar to the last model, so there's really no excuse to not use it right away. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you watched the entire thing, be sure to let me know with a comment down in the comment section below. This is specifically going to be for people who have already tried the new controller. What did you think? Do you agree with the points I made in this video, or do you prefer the old Xbox controller? Be sure to leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe, turn on post notifications, do whatever the heck you want, and I will catch you guys next time.